Right, give me a couple of seconds. Let me just make sure we're live. Are we good to go? Yes, sir. Yes, we are. Right. Time for some secret sauce after coaching 340 plus now men and women through the Vegan Slim and Sustain program since its inception, in 2020. I want to share with you today 10 tips and tricks that I feel, or the 10 rather tips and tricks that I feel have been most impactful for my clients. Start injecting these 10 tips and tricks into your weight loss strategy starting today. And I promise you, it's a bold claim, your progress will absolutely skyrocket. It will fly. And when I use the word fast in the title here, it may sound a little bit like clickbait, and I suppose it is to a degree, but I really do mean it. So maybe it's not clickbait. Not as fast as 10 pounds in a week because you're starving yourself, you're absolutely ravenous, or you're doing some wild fasting type strategy. No, but fast enough so the weight loss feels significant. Fast enough so you actually notice a change every single week, not just on the scale, but you start to see that forming in the mirror week on week. But to an extent that also feels safe and sustainable. That's what we're going for here. That's my MO. Anyway, let's get the intro out of the way. I'll be back with tip number 1. Let's dive into this. Thanks for joining me. Tip number 1 here, portion control. Just eat plants and you can eat as much as you want. Have you ever heard that before? Have you ever perhaps said that yourself before? You can have seconds if you're doing the 50-50 plate, no problem. You can go back for more, so long as it fits that 50-50 plate formula. It's whole foods, you're eating plants. Don't worry about the portions so much. That's not important. You wouldn't believe how often, or maybe you would, I hear these things when I open up my Instagram, when I open up my YouTube, when potential clients reach out to me for the first time. It's incredible how many people have either been told or have falsely assumed that eating plant-based is a free pass to eat as much as they want. Unlimited portions. Doesn't matter as long as it's whole plant foods, right? Maybe you even believe this yourself right now watching this video. Remember, 2 things can be simultaneously true. 2 things can be true at the same time. Number 1, the plant-based diet contains so many low-calorie foods, so many foods with a low caloric density, that you can eat quite generously and still lose weight. That's absolutely correct, right? That can be true. As well as, number 2, the plant-based diet contains some higher calorie foods with a higher caloric density that you can't eat quite so liberally, quite so generously. And even then, even with the more low-calorie foods, let's say, if you eat them in unnecessarily large portions or graze when you're bored, stressed, other forms of emotional eating, or you've got binge eating problems, you might still overdo it, even on the lower calorie plant foods. And these things can be simultaneously, true. And I think that's lost. I think in this world of absolutes where it's either got to be one thing or another, so simplistic and unnecessarily so, falsely so. Number 1, plant-based diets are amazing for weight loss because, or for one reason, because of their low caloric density. But 2, that doesn't mean you still can't overdo it. It's still possible to overdo it despite how highly effective this approach is. Does that make sense? So with this question of can you eat as much as you want, which I suppose is what we're trying to tackle here, is it true? Can you eat as much as you want on a plant-based diet? Well, it depends what you mean by as much as you want, right? That might look very different for yourself as it might do for me. Make sense? So versus other nutrition approaches, the volume of your meals, with this whole foods plant-based methodology compared to the calories that volume contains is absolutely outstanding. And it's one of the reasons why this plant-based approach is highly effective for weight loss. And I would say, just to add weight to this argument, I would say roughly 7 out of 10-ish clients will reach out to me after 1 week on Vegan Slim and Sustain in their first Sunday check-in, and they will say, Ryan, I'm utterly amazed at how much food I can eat on this plan and still lose weight. Ryan, when you first gave me that meal plan, even though I trust, people literally say this to me, when you first gave me that meal plan, yes, I trusted you, but I read through it and I was like, surely I'm going to get fat from this. Surely I'm going to gain weight from this. So it is amazing how much you can eat, but that's only with the right dietary planning. Do you see what I mean? So versus other nutrition approaches, this approach is absolutely incredible. But that's only because, with my clients at least, that's only because I'm planning it for them, right? If you just copy and paste from a YouTube video you saw or from an Instagram post, if you just copy and paste the portion sizes, like, oh, that person's eating that meal, they're in good shape, I'm just going to do that plant-based meal myself. Or alternatively, you're just eating as much as you want until you deem that you're full or you've had your fill. Well, and you haven't got that much experience yet, well, you might be in trouble. You might well be in trouble if you're copy and pasting. So bottom line, be mindful of your portion sizes. This is totally lost in the plant-based world, in the plant-based sphere. And I can sort of understand why, because of how highly effective this approach is, because of the low caloric density of many foods under the plant-based umbrella. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible to overeat. Even healthy plant-based foods can contribute to weight gain if consumed excessively. You can use things like smaller plates and bowls to help control your portion sizes. You can try and get more present and mindful in the moment. Next time you go to open the fridge, do you actually need to eat right now? Next time you've got a plate in front of you and you're eating it, do I actually need another bite here? Am I full? Becoming more self-aware in the moment, actually assessing, being present and trying to assess, have I had my fill here? These mindfulness practices can really, really help you work out if maybe you are going over the top with your portion sizes. You can also watch some of my other videos where I've walked through how to determine your calorie targets if you want to be slightly more scientific with this. Bottom line, just know that it is still possible to overeat, even on a plant-based approach, even eating whole foods. And that's where, I know this is coming from me, but that's where my program is a game changer for clients, because they come to me thinking, I'm eating plant-based, Ryan, why am I not losing weight? Even the ones that are being consistent. Right? Ryan, I'm being consistent. I'm following this whole foods plant-based methodology. Why on earth am I not losing weight? I've been told by every YouTuber under the sun that I should be losing weight right now. And all I do is I make a meal plan for them that tells them exactly what and how much to eat. And it might just be a couple of tweaks in some cases from how they're eating before. And boom, that scale starts absolutely flying just because of maybe a 80, 90, 100 calorie difference to their meals. Their overall meal plan for the day. It might just be 30 calories on a meal, and that gets that scale moving even more effectively. So yeah, it's a game changer because I create them a personalized plan that tells them exactly what and how much to eat. Now, what's interesting about this is I'm just talking about overeating right now. This whole 5-6 minutes I've given on portion control, I've been talking about overeating. Adversely, I actually, would you believe, have a certain percentage, and this will affect a number of you watching this video. I have a certain percentage of new clients that were undereating before they joined Vegan, Slim and Sustain. And because they were eating all those low-calorie plant foods that are so, as I said earlier, high in volume for the calories they provide, they were actually getting full without consuming enough calories. So when I talk about portion control, I'm not just talking about overeating. I'm also advising to make sure that you're not undereating as well. Some signs that you might be undereating, it's pretty obvious, admittedly, in many cases, but lethargy, fatigue, just low energy generally, irritability, that's a big sign for me when I'm starting to get hungry. I've not fed myself enough in a day. I've not fueled myself enough. I start to get a bit snappy Rye comes out a bit temperamental, frequent hunger pangs, growling stomach. Again, these things are natural to a degree, right? You don't want to never be hungry. But if you notice that it's very, very frequent, again, you might not be feeding yourself enough. Rapid weight loss, obviously a telltale sign. Hair loss, brittle nails, other functions in the body not performing quite so well. Libido dropping, so on and so forth, radical changes to menstrual cycles and whatnot. These can all be signs that you're undereating. So hopefully, whether undereating or overeating, hopefully you can use these tips as a guideline to increase or decrease your portions as necessary. But that is tip number one, and it's going to get the most emphasis. That's why I spent so long on it here versus what I'm about to share with these other 9 tips, because this is so lost in the plant-based space where it's so just eat plants, and you'll magically lose weight. And for some people, that does happen, but not for my clients. I need to come in, give them more structure, give them more precision with ingredients, with portion sizes, with quantities, and then magically, wow, who would have thought it? The scale starts moving, because portions still matter. As amazing as this whole foods plant-based methodology is, portions still matter. Tip number 2, batch cooking, no meal prep. I'm not the meal prep nerd. I've done it in the past, but I am not today the meal prep nerd who spends all Sunday afternoon, I'm going to sound really condescending here, who spends all Sunday afternoon with the Tupperware containers, making dishes for 5 days, 7 days. Not my style. And frankly, number 1, it's a busyness problem. I consider myself far too busy for that. I'm sure I could carve out the time, but it doesn't feel practical to do that every week. Secondly, food tastes awful after a little while. So like making something for 5 or 7 days, oh my goodness, I suppose it depends what it is. I just never really fallen into being a meal plan person. It doesn't work, a meal prep, person. It doesn't work for me on a large scale. But what I am a believer in, and what I try and brainwash my clients with, and what seems to work for the busy mums, for my male clients that are, crushing it out there career-wise, they don't have time to do all this food stuff constantly. Batch cooking. Batch cooking is an absolute game changer, because let's say you're making meatless chili, which one client was just telling me is their favorite recipe so far on the program. The meatless chili with the kidney beans, the tofu, so on and so forth. It's got chickpeas in, I think so. Why not make 4 servings? Right? Why not make 4 servings instead of just 1? And that's your dinner, your lunch, however it's prescribed in your program for the next couple of days. Let's say my chia and raisin oatmeal cookies, which are always a big hit. I give my clients serving sizes for 6, 4, or 8 servings, so that, okay, that's my snacks covered for the next 3, 4 days, whatever it might be. Or as long as the cookies remain fresh anyway. And so I've never been a big meal prep person, but I've always been big on, well, if you're making a dish, especially a cooked dish, why not make multiple? Why not make it for several days? Or if you're making rice, if you're boiling rice for 1 meal, even though it's a different meal you might be having for dinner tomorrow evening, if you know it contains rice, or if you actually plan your meals so that you're using lots of the same ingredients, so it's really easy in terms of streamlining grocery lists and whatnot, well, why not make double the rice, triple the rice for those next couple of meals, even if the meals are different, but they still contain rice? Makes sense? So batch cooking, massive advocate. It saves time, it saves energy, it saves stress thinking about, oh, what am I going to eat tonight? I don't have anything in. You're prepped, you're ahead, but you're not doing it to the extent that you're doing some 7-day meal prep that requires Sunday afternoons to be totally sacrificed. Again, I sounded probably slightly patronizing, condescending at the start to people who like that, to people who meal prep works for. It may well work for you. No judgment. It may well work for you. It's just never seemed the right fit for me. And for the mums, the dads I help, the career-minded people I help, the students that I help, male or female, it really helps to do lots of batch cooking, but no major meal prep. Tip number 3. There we go. There we are, right the second time. Include some healthy fats. Controversial, I know. Some people won't like this, but opt for those healthier plant-based fats like avocados, nuts, and seeds. While fats are higher in calories, they provide essential nutrients and they help you feel satisfied. Now, I appreciate there is some debate about this, about fat intake in online circles, but my stance on this is perfectly clear, and it's remained the same for years. You'll know this if you've been following me for a little while. I agree with a whole foods, plant-based, low-fat, I want to be clear, low-fat diet overall, but I do not believe in the total exclusion of fat-rich plant foods altogether. The nuts, the seeds, the avocados, I don't agree with a wholesale ban on those. I don't allow that. I think they bring something to the table, hormonally, satisfaction-wise, nutritionally. Just don't go overboard with them. Just understand and appreciate that they do have a high caloric density. So if you're going to have nut butter on toast, you might need to be quite precise with how much nut butter you're going to use. Otherwise, 20, 30, 40, 50 calories have just slipped away from you like that with just a little bit more of a tablespoon, half a tablespoon more, for example. Fats bring something to the table. They are really, really important. So I don't agree with the total exclusion of them, even though overall I agree with this whole foods, low-fat approach. I'm not talking about having a high-fat diet, I want to make clear, but I'm also not talking about the total exclusion. Number 4, in a similar vein, incorporate plant-based protein. Include a variety of plant-based protein sources such as beans, lentils, tofu, tempeh, I'm okay with those soy products, edamame, Quinoa, admittedly, it's not an overt protein source as such, but quinoa, hemp seeds also. Protein helps you feel full and it supports muscle maintenance. We just talked about fats. There's a theme here. Some corners, I feel, of the plant-based nutrition world, certainly online, are placing so much emphasis on carbohydrates. And for the record, I agree with that. How many videos have I made on this channel over the years debunking some of these ridiculous misconceptions about carbohydrates in the mainstream? I agree with it. I've done it because there's so much misinfo about carbs out there. But let's remember, all three of the macronutrients matters. Carbohydrates, protein, and fat. They're all important, and they're all important for different reasons. They all play a different role in the body. And of course, that doesn't mean that you want or necessarily need all three macronutrients, in equal amounts. But my argument here is let's not be so dogmatic about this high carb thing, so stuck on this high carb script that we neglect fat and protein altogether, because they are still important. And I know protein in particular is overemphasized, isn't it, in some quarters. So maybe it feels a little bit tiring coming to a plant-based channel where you've heard about protein a million times in the past. You understand how overemphasized it is in the mainstream. And then you come to a plant-based channel like mine and you're hearing me talk about the importance of protein. I appreciate that might feel a little bit tiring, but I'm not going to ignore the value of protein and fat, for that matter, by extension, just because some people overdo their messaging on protein. Just because some people overemphasize protein, that doesn't mean I'm going to sweep it under the rug and never talk about it and say, well, other people talk about that and they overemphasize it. It's still important. It's still important. And my job here is to try and convey where it ranks in terms of the hierarchy of importance. My argument being, carbohydrates, protein, fat, all three macronutrients play a really, really important role. Let's not get so stuck on this high carb methodology, which again, I agree with, but let's not get so literal, right, and dogmatic about it that we never think about fat, we never think about protein, because they have a role to play. And I make this very, very clear to new clients. This isn't like when they join my program, this isn't like other programs you've heard about from other plant-based, other vegan coaches. I won't let you just get away with eating a potato, broccoli, and a bit of cheese sauce for lunch. I don't think that's an appropriate meal to have regularly. I don't think that's sufficient. Yes, we want to keep things really simple, but you, as a client of mine, are going to have a balanced, and by balanced, I mean in a macro and a micronutrient sense, satisfying and a nutritionally diverse diet, right? You're going to have diverse vegan meals that tick multiple boxes. Simplicity, yes, but we also don't want to be so simplistic with things. You literally sit down for lunch and you eat 200 calories because you've just got, and you're starving yourself without really perhaps knowing it all the time, because you're just eating a potato. Potatoes are amazing. I'm not demonizing them. Potato, bit of broccoli and some cheese sauce. That's not an appropriate meal for most. Yes, we want to keep things simple, but we want that diversity and we want that balance. I hate the word balance. It's so false to use, but you get what I mean. You will not be abandoning my clients. I say this, you are not going to abandon any semblance of plant protein and just eat a potato as a meal, right? You will not be totally excluding all fat-rich plant foods by extension. That's not my MO. Okay, that's not the formula for success I've landed on after helping 340 plus people lose weight now. This is not the formula for success that I see. And I've had my phases in my life of going through, well, that initial phase of being extremely high carb. And then I realized, anecdotally, admittedly, but through my own experience, that for me personally, it was better to not totally neglect the protein and not totally neglect the fat. And that's how I've landed on what I've landed on. Tip number 5 here, watch out for invisible calories. This is an interesting one, because I think a lot of people don't realize they're doing this. Whereas some of the other things I've shared, I think there's a degree to which people will take what I've said and it's a reminder. It's like, oh, I know I need to fix this, but Ryan hasn't said anything particularly profound there. With this one, I think people are like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. I think there's a few epiphanies that will happen as you watch the next couple of minutes here. Watch out for these invisible calories, then condiments, sauces, beverages. They're the big three. I had a client recently who seemingly forgot to tell me about their Starbucks coffee that they had for the first week of the program, and then realized, oh, I should probably tell Ryan about the Starbucks coffee, which naturally I gave them a little bit of a grilling for. You know who you are watching this if you are. We worked out actually, and of course they didn't know better, they didn't know otherwise, but we actually worked out that it was adding somewhere between maybe 100 and 150 calories to their daily diet. And that wasn't enough for that particular client to not lose weight in the first week. They still lost weight, but surely enough to slow it down relatively significantly. So if there's anything that you're consuming right now habitually, here's my battle cry to you. If there's anything you're consuming habitually, so habitually that you've almost forgotten that you actually consume it, look at the nutrition info. Turn that jar over, turn that can over, jump on the Starbucks website, look at that, whatever it is. Latte, I forget, there's so many different types of coffee. I'm not a coffee guy. There's so many different types of coffee. I find it incredibly tedious. But latte, frappuccino, cappuccino, mappuccino, noctacino, noccacino, whatever it is, you might be shocked at just how many calories that contains. And again, it's not all about calories. What about all the other nasties that are getting thrown in some of these very processed beverages? Number 6, focus on whole foods. Well, this one is hardly profound, is it? So let's spend no more than 30 seconds on it. You want to be emphasizing fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. These foods are nutrient dense and lower in calories compared to processed foods. Nuts and seeds, I still threw them in this list. They have a higher caloric density than the aforementioned. But generally, many foods under the plant-based umbrella, I said this 10 minutes ago, have a caloric density that is very low relative to foods that populate other nutrition approaches anyway. And this isn't to say, of course, that I never let my clients eat processed foods. There are some processed foods that I actually consider incredibly healthy, incredibly weight loss friendly, and frankly are cornerstones of my meal plans. Bread, pasta, healthy cereals, but it's the right kinds and in the right quantities in combinations with appropriate ingredients in their plan, and it's all factored in. The math has been done there. But these breads and pastas and healthy cereals, the Ezekiel bread, the Dave's Killer range for my clients over in North America, these are a million miles away from heavily processed junk foods. I think this leads us nicely onto tip number 7, which is quite obviously, who can guess it, limit processed foods, okay, generally speaking. Minimize your consumption of heavily processed vegan foods like vegan snacks, heavily refined grains, sugary drinks, ice cream, all the vegan I say all the vegan alternatives, I should rather say lots of the vegan alternatives and mock products out there, the mock meats, etc. These items are often high in calories, unhealthy fats, often lots of added refined sugars, oils, all sorts of chemicals, preservatives, so on and so forth. Again, that's not to say that you need to be squeaky clean every single day to see great life-changing results, to transform, but you'll do well, in my opinion and assessment, to avoid these things. And actually, what I'll often say to my clients is that these junk foods, you can get away with them in your diet once in a while. One piece of cake or whatever every now and again, it's not really going to affect the number on the scale. It's not going to, one piece of cake a week isn't going to magically undo, the amazing steps that you've taken every single day with regards to your nutrition for the rest of the week. However, might not affect the waistline. However, the bigger risk, especially if you're very early on in your healthy eating journey, is that it creates this sort of slippery slope mentality. Do the floodgates open because you've had that one piece of cake again, or you've had that one food that feels a little bit nostalgic for you, even though you've done so well the rest of the week or for the last couple of days. Might not affect the scale, but what does it do up here? Do the floodgates open? Small holes sink big ships. Do you start making some allowances that you might not have if you didn't have the cake in the first place? Makes sense? So never forget, when I was very, very new to this myself, I remember hearing, was it a YouTube video, perhaps watching a YouTube video? I still had another couple of pounds to lose, I think, at this time, back in 2015. I never forget hearing Dr. McDougall say, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's almost easier to be 100% with your nutrition than it is to kid yourself that you can manage balancing a little bit of junk in your diet. And I'm definitely paraphrasing that, but I thought that was brilliant. And that really, really resonated with me. I think the example he gave from memory was with chocolate bars. And he said, it's easier for me to not have the chocolate bars in the house at all, because even though I could get away with having the occasional chocolate bar, it's too tempting. And when they're sat there in my kitchen, and I know they're in my kitchen, well, I'd rather just not have it there. I'd rather just be 100% rather than like semi-flexible. Does that make sense? And I thought that was a really great example. I'll never forget, like even whatever it was, 8 years ago now, I still can literally hear the video, watch the video, picture it in my mind of him saying that. I thought that really resonated with me. I think for me, it is almost easier to, for me, it was initially anyway, almost easier to abstain 100%. And even though I knew I could still lose weight with a little bit of this or a little bit of that every now and again, mentally, it was easier and better for my relationship with food to just go all at it and to just go for total abstinence. And I don't think, admittedly, abstinence, let me take a sip of water, folks, but abstinence is, I don't think it's realistic over the long term, nor even necessary, frankly. But during your early stages, and this is what I'll say to my clients, during my early stages, where you're trying to change those taste buds, where you're trying to cement new habits, where you're trying to take food off a pedestal in your mind, where you're trying to change the stories and narratives you have around certain foods that you've got addictions or afflictions to, abstinence is so powerful. And arguably, even though it feels hard initially, so much easier than trying to kid yourself into some sort of flexible dieting approach. So yeah, we want to limit those processed foods. And that's not just because of on the scale, that's also mentally what it might do to us, you know, to constantly remind our taste buds and the dopamine receptors, biochemistry, the gut bacteria, what it's like to eat lots of processed foods. It doesn't take a lot to bring the house of cards down, especially in the early stages. So I want to make clear here, I'm not saying you need to be perfect to change your life. You know, I don't ask my clients to be perfect. I don't want to set that unrealistic expectation. I allow my clients to eat out once a week for the more advanced or busier clients, maybe twice a week, for example, for those that travel lots for work or whatever, for leisure. I might say, okay, twice a week is a bit more acceptable for you in your case. It's a bit more manageable. I might allow that. I might be fine with clients having the occasional glass of wine, G&T, like I do myself every now and again. Otherwise, I'd be a massive hypocrite, right? But the moment that slippery slope ensues, I'll be the first to say, okay, maybe we've let you off the leash a little bit too much. So yeah, limiting processed foods, you don't need to be perfect, but limiting processed foods as a rule of thumb, you're going to be so much better off. It's going to be so much easier to actually change your relationship with food and to see consistent week-on-week drops on the scale rather than this sort of, oh, I had a perfect week and then I had a week where a few Beyond burgers jumped into my diet, a little bit of the vegan Ben & Jerry's ice cream jumped into my diet again, and now I'm up on the scale. And it's just, people make their journey so much, their weight loss journey anyway, so much longer than it needs to be with this ridiculous inconsistency, which is what I think I talked about in my latest video. Some comments here before we move on to tip number 8. I hope you're finding this useful. Mary Lee says, or Mary Lee, forgive me, batch cooking my starches and pot soup every week is perfect for my lifestyle. Amen. Like it. And that was, if you're just joining me, that's in reference to what I said towards the start, which was, I'm a big fan of batch cooking. I don't do meal prep. Batch cook, if you're going to make a meal, why not double up on portions? So I'm glad that's working for you nicely. Alan says, hey, what's up? Good morning. Haven't seen you in a while. I've been here, Alan. I've been here. Maybe you haven't done a live in a couple of weeks, but I've been here. Okay, let's get back. So tip number 8 then. Leave comments. If you are watching live, folks, there's not going to be that many people on, but if you are watching live, leave your questions and comments in the chat. I'll see if I've got time to get to them at the end. Number 8 then. Are we on number 8? Yes, we are. This is maybe another obvious one, but there are always new people coming to this channel that don't quite realize this yet. You want to eat lots of high fiber foods, fiber-rich foods like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, the foods I've been talking about throughout, admittedly. They help you feel fuller for longer. They reduce the chances of overeating. It's not a guarantee, but they reduce the chances of overeating, and they allow you to better control your calorie intake, in my opinion and experience. These are a huge area of focus for me, these fiber-rich foods, when I'm sitting down and planning and designing my clients' meal plans. When a new client joins Vegan, Slim and Sustain, they fill out their intake form. They tell me what foods they're enjoying. They give me all their, statistics and whatnot. They tell me what plant-based foods they enjoy, any allergies or intolerances they may have, any foods that they don't like, they're not allergic to, but they plainly don't like. And then I use that info and create a meal plan for them. And yeah, one thing that's constantly on my mind in designing those plans is fiber. I'm constantly thinking about it. And it's just so fun, the data and the statistics on fiber intake, you know, in the Western world is utterly shocking, and it drops. It drops a relatively significant amount every 5 years to every decade or so. The data on fiber intake is horrible to look at, and so many problems result from low fiber intake, and so many health elements would be solved with a higher fiber intake, both directly through the role that fiber plays, but also indirectly in that the sort of foods that fiber comes with are also beneficial in other ways in terms of anti-inflammatory properties and so on. Anyway, and their low caloric density, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, I digress. But fiber, huge areas of focus for me. And I do feel like, admittedly, there's a lot of people from maybe a more starch solution background, like I used to be, or a high carb background. And I'm not exactly sure why this happens, because Dr. McDougall talks so positively about these constantly. But there's a lot of people from that background that are missing the value of beans and lentils. Legumes more widely, so throwing peas into this category as well. And I am cramming, my clients will attest to this, I'm cramming, you know, beans and lentils and peas into my meal plans for my clients. And sometimes there can be digestive issues, admittedly, but I've got ways to troubleshoot those too. But beans and lentils, so filling, largely, not exclusively, but largely because of their fiber content. So if you, and this is maybe sort of something that takes care of itself, because if you're eating lots of whole plant foods, you've probably got a very high fiber intake anyway, but just worth emphasizing one of the magic ingredients in this approach. Tip number 9 then, it's not a nutrition one, but I had to get it in somewhere. You longer term subscribers, those of you who perhaps watch me and listen to my advice more closely here, you won't be surprised that I've included this, because this is another thing that is slept on in the plant-based world for some reason. Stay physically active. Wow, I know, again, nothing particularly profound, but actually it is slightly profound, I would say, in this space. Combine that plant-based art of yours with regular exercise. Engage in activities that you'll enjoy, and that's a secret for itself, but engage in activities you'll actually enjoy, such as whatever it might be for you: brisk walking, cycling, swimming, dancing, martial arts. For me, I love my tennis, don't I? Physical activity supports weight loss and overall well-being. So it's not just a weight loss thing, but it does affect weight loss, and I'll come on to that in a second. It's also a physical and mental health and well-being thing too. My clients, as many of you know, do walking for the first month or so only. And it's such an easy, gentle way to get started. But we do, full transparency, up the ante as the program goes on. But we do it in these incremental, not to sound really condescending, baby steps. We do it in a gradual manner. And so by the time they're doing those walk runs in month 3, a couple of months ago, they'd think, oh, there's no way this guy's going to get me running. There's no way Ryan's going to get me running. There's no way. But by the time we get there, they've already built up their fitness to an extent to whereby it feels like such an effortless, a natural step up comparatively versus starting from scratch. So I love walking because it's such an easy, gentle way to get started, and then we up the ante as we go. And yeah, we do this because, and we up the ante, we have the exercise progression in Vegan Slim and Sustain. I don't just say, oh, you only have to do walking for the full 3 months, even though that's something I toyed with, and that's something I did in the past with clients. I don't do that anymore, because doing that more intense stuff, it's amazing for your physical and mental well-being. But as I said earlier, but in terms of weight loss, it makes it easier. It makes it easier to find a calorie deficit when you're actually burning some energy, to use pseudoscientific terms, where you're actually expending some energy on exercise. Now, don't get me wrong, at the same time as I say this is where the nuance is. You can lose plenty of weight doing very little exercise, doing little to no exercise. Admittedly, you can. But I argue that it's easier / faster with some exercise. And finally, I've got some more comments. Rachel, you've helped me so much and added so much to this community and lifestyle. That's really kind, Rachel. Thank you very much. Alan says Oreo cookies. Oh, God. Yeah, they can be pretty addictive for folks. They can. I can't remember the last time I had an Oreo cookie. But certainly, I remember finding out that Oreos were vegan and demolishing a packet. Yes, I remember doing that. But yeah, now they don't tempt me so much. I think I probably had so much when I found out they were vegan. I used to like Oreos years ago as well, prior to going vegan. When I found out there were, I probably had so many packets that I was like, I can't touch these again. Number 10 then, final one here. And this is slightly different because I would like to think I've given you lots of practical steps with these other 9 tips. But this one is slightly different because it's more attitude and mentality based. That isn't to say it's less valuable. It might be the most valuable of them all. I'll let you decide for yourself. But you need to be okay with being on your own. You need to be okay with being on your own. Let me have a little sippy and let me unpack this one for you. Some of you will know where I'm going with this. Losing weight, sadly, is a very lonely experience, as many of you know. Take it one step further than that and try and lose weight without eating meat or dairy. Well, that's really kind of niche. That's another level, right? Lots of people have tried to lose weight in their lives. If you tell someone you're losing weight, that's not going to be a groundbreaking idea to them that they've never heard before. But combine that in with this vegan plant-based methodology, well, that is niche. As growing as veganism is, that is still pretty niche. And I work with a lot of people in those, I've never liked this term, but flyover states in the US or rural countryside, for example, here in the UK, and people around them just don't get it. And maybe they never will. But here's the thing. Who cares? You're not doing this for them, are you? You're doing this for you. And if you've got the ethical vegan element, there's a bigger cause at play as well that you care about, undoubtedly. So who cares? Who cares what other people think or what other people say? And so what I say to people on this is buckle up. Buckle up, because you might well get some criticism. But you're a big boy, you're a big girl, you can take it. You can take it on the chin. You might get some criticism on this journey. Or maybe not overt criticism so much as just not maybe having as much support or understanding as you were expecting for something that in your head you're doing that's so positive. Maybe people don't get it or resonate with, and so they don't cheer you on as much as you hoped for. Success can kind of shine a light on other people's insecurities. Or when you go vegan without even saying something, people can start to sort of cope for their choices or assume that you're judging them morally for what they're doing. And that can, again, shine a light back onto them. And people can change for the negative, sadly, when they see your success. That is a real thing. That is a real thing. But don't just be self-indulgent with it and say, well, they just don't know how to handle how well I'm doing. Oh, they're just jealous. They're just envious. Maybe they are. Maybe they're not, and you're delusional, but maybe they are. But it's just a little bit arrogant, and it's hardly compassionate to say that, is it? Or to be like that. Oh, they're just jealous of me. That's not really productive. I still encourage you to respectfully explain to people, calmly explain to people why you're doing what you're doing, why it means so much to you, and why you've taken the view you have that this plant-based approach is what's best. Still explain to people that. Be amicable, be polite, be respectful. People might never get it, but at least make the effort to explain for your own peace of mind, to explain, and never expect them to get it, right? Curious folks, they might well, but never expect people to understand, resonate, agree with what you're doing. Otherwise, I don't know why you would have that expectation. I suppose this sounds seemingly obvious, but people do. People get really, really hurt when people challenge them on their veganism, or when people start asking questions, the obligatory questions about protein and B12. And it's like, I empathize with this because I know how ridiculously irritating it is to be sat around with a group of people, some of whom will be overweight themselves. And for them, let's say they've known you 10, 15 years, long-term friend or family member, they've known you 10, 15 years, they've never said an ounce to you about healthy lifestyle and nutrition before. And then all of a sudden, even though they're 60 pounds heavier than you, they've got something to say about what you're doing all of a sudden, right? Armchair nutrition experts, I sometimes call them. I empathize with that. I know how irritating that can be, but never, ever go into this with expectations that you'll be able to convince people or debate people, or that because you think you're right, other people are going to agree once you've explained your arguments to them. Don't expect people to get it, because they're not going to in many cases. Now, my clients don't get this too badly overall because they've got me there and they've got fellow members in the Facebook group, for example. But at the same time, there's going to be a time when I'm not there for the support and accountability and the cheerleading, right? And they are truly on their own. And even then, I'm sort of a digital relationship with them, right? In their physical lives, they might still be the only person that's doing what they're doing in many cases. So in other words, you're going to need some resilience, right? You're going to need to not be reliant on other people's validation for what you're doing and other people accepting what you're doing. They might be supportive of you losing weight, as people are in many cases, and bettering your health, but maybe they totally don't agree that you're doing it the right way with this vegan plant-based methodology. Well, you have to just be cool with that, right? And when you do have a bit of resilience, when you can be calm and respectful and unemotional with people and just explain what you're doing and set up those boundaries and say, look, you're doing something different to me. You have a different philosophy. That's fine. That's cool. I'm doing this thing right now. I really believe in it. I've done my research and it's working nicely for me so far. And when you set that, calm but firm boundary with people, like you do you, I'm doing me, when you set that sort of boundary with people, it kind of gives you this unwavering sort of North Star. That's my North Star. There it is. That's my path forward mentality. And when some people might just cave, to the societal pressure, or cave to other people's standards, or cave because their partner, fiance started arguing with them that, no, you've got to eat meat. Some people do genuinely cave. Not on my program, I don't let them. But, when you have that resilience, you've got that clarity, you've got that North Star, and it feels unshakable. It feels unwavering. Right, that's it. I hope this was useful. Remember the obligatory, I always put a disclaimer in the description of my videos anyway, and sometimes in the intro. Remember, it's important to consult with a healthcare professional, registered dietitian, nutritionist, to ensure that your plant-based diet meets your nutritional needs and suits your individual health goals. But I hope this gives you some food for thought. If you need more help with weight loss and you're ready to lose your first 10, 15, 20 pounds or more in the next 12 weeks and build healthy habits that you can actually sustain for life, because that's important. You don't just want to lose weight, but actually set up some habits that you can sustain for life. You can fill out the form at veganslimandsustain.com. Once more, that's veganslimandsustain.com. Bit of a mouthful, but it's also linked down below. And you can go there, fill out the form, learn more about my program. I don't think there's any more comments, folks, given the time of day I'm doing this. I wasn't expecting many, but thanks to those that join me live, thanks to those that watch the replay. I will see you all rather soon, I hope. Take care.